Utah may have just found their wide receiver one for the 2025 season. Who is it? And what else do we learn from another viewing session for Utah spring football? I'm going to tell you on today's Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen and view of the day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. If it's your first time listening to this show, make sure you like and subscribe. Today's episode is brought to you by TurboTax. Ready for stress-free taxes and most money back guaranteed? Head over to TurboTax.com today and get matched with your expert. My name is JT Wistrcill, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department. On today's show, talk about all the latest comments we heard from any other spring football viewing session. A surprise quarterback is kind of starting to emerge in the QB2, QB3 race. Talk about some of the depth at Utah's other positions. But first, we have to talk about what's been one of the biggest enigmas that we're now starting to get an answer to that question that has plagued this Utah football team all offseason. It's who is this team's top wide receiver going to be? And honestly, I didn't think we'd get clarity this early because Kyle Whittingham is not someone who gives out praise very easily and gives out shout outs and compliments and declares races over before they're done. And maybe that's even too far because he didn't declare it's over, but he did say if there was a game today, this individual would be Utah's wide receiver one. I have long thought it would be Otto Tia, just his 500 yards of production at Utah State. That was the most among the guys returning outside of a Ryan Davis, but I looked at Tia like, okay, it's more of your outside receiver type guy. But it's actually another guy who's been stepping up. And it's someone who stepped up in the final game of the year last year, and that's Zacharias Williams. The sophomore played in 10 games last year, had 10 catches for 101 yards, and he also had 3 rushing attempts for 16 yards. Keep that in mind because that actually last stat's important. He really broke out in that last game against UCF. He had 6 grabs for 72 yards and 2 carries on the ground for 11 yards. Utah just did a lot, worked him into the offense a lot of different ways, and it left us feeling optimistic. But we've also seen this before with receivers where it's like, and just different players on this roster, right? You have one big performance, whether it's a random game, the last game of the season, even in the spring game, we've seen this before too, right? And we're like, okay, this guy's going to be a dude for this Utah football team. And we overreact to that small sample size. And then it ends up not panning out the way that we hoped it would. But this is different when you're talking about Zacharias Williams because Coach Whittingham is the one that's showering with the praise. Josh Furlong of KSL.com tweeted this out earlier, talking about it, the quote that Whittingham said that he's the guy making the most plays right now. And if they had to play a game right now, he would be wide receiver one. And that is massive praise for the sophomore to step up. I think this really excites me too, because Williams is a guy that has that potential. 6'2", 196, only a sophomore too, got a little bit of experience last year and rated a 3-star recruit, but a guy who had a potential to do so much more. He's had a guy who had 51 catches for 943 yards, 18.5 yards per catch, and 13 touchdowns his senior season in high school. And he was the number 39, rated the number 39 recruit in the state of California, one of the top high school football states, as we know as well, too. So a lot of guys end up get overlooked in that state. And Williams seems like he could be the latest to do so. Williams has a really good catch radius, too. He's got good length. And one thing, too, is you got to love is the multiple ways that Utah can use him. Coach Whittingham mentioned his elusiveness. Utah would get him the ball in different scenarios last year, jet sweeps against UCF to get him involved. And now they're trying to do that even more, which is incredibly exciting that they're already talking about like, hey, how can we use him in the run game? And Williams seems like he's going to be that guy who's going to end up being this team's wide receiver one, at least right now. It's early. Otto Tia, there's several other individuals that could pass him up. But as much as I get excited about an Otto Tia, even a Justin Stevenson for what those guys did at the G5 level, there's still something to be said to being a P4 guy, having gone against P4 competition a year before. And contributing as a freshman is one thing, because what's the largest leap we always see, or most cases, freshman to sophomore year. Williams seems like he's ready to make that leap, be this team's number one target on the outside. And I think him and Dampier are already growing their connection, which is incredibly exciting. So love that the young freshman Williams is already emerging as a guy this Utah team not just can rely on, but might be the guy they can rely on. We did a show last week. Utah's going to miss Dorian Singer, a proven veteran who can produce at that level. That's a big loss for this team. But Williams might mitigate that loss with his level of production in 25. Really excited to see what Williams can do, and excited to see that we've heard a couple of different targets breaking out. We're not going to talk as much today about like Hunter Andrews because we talked about him on last week's show, but he was one of the stars of the scrimmage the media was able to watch on Saturday. And speaking of stars, Steve Bartle of KSL Sports put this out there talking about Devin Dampier, saying that Dampier, and you can see this on his X, said it was a good first drive from Dampier in the Utah offense, nearly stalled out, but Dampier's ability to buy time, patience in the pocket led to good things, threw a touchdown to Zach Williams, we just talked about, and then made a girl throw down Bentley down the sideline, who also made a great grab. So when you read that stuff, first of all, I can not be excited about Williams and Dampier hooking up in the end zone, but Bentley is a guy who felt he's still kind of continuing to try and grow in this offense. He did some nice things last year, but was still a guy, coming over from Snow College, still trying to work his body and just get in the right position, learning what it takes to be a P4 tight end, to all things that are very important. So he was one of those guys, took him a little bit of time, but now it seems like he's getting settled in well for this team too. And speaking of getting settled in, Dampier, that dual threat ability is massive when you're talking about Devin Dampier. The ability to buy time. That is such a massive thing that you see for quarterbacks, is a defense can have everything figured out, but then what happens? Oh, our defensive end that we thought was going to sack the quarterback, because that's how we drew it up on the chalkboard or clipboard, he didn't get home. And now there's Dampier's running down the sideline, or that quarterback is running down the sideline. That's what's going to make this Utah offense so tough too. DBs can only cover for so long, and Dampier can buy the time necessary for his guys to get open. He's ready to make this jump, and the early returns are very encouraging on Devin Dampier based on what we've been hearing in scrimmages, as well as from what the media's seen in viewing the scrimmage and viewing all these practices as well. So really encouraged about the progress that Devin Dampier is making, even though, of course, he's still in a very similar offense to what Jason Beck did, just with some slight tweaks, I can imagine, for the P4 level. Another group that's very similar is the Utah offensive line. Kyle Whittingham had a very interesting quote about the Utah offensive line, talking about his confidence in the group, because he said that this team overall right now, he said that the offensive line is the unit he's the most confident with what they've been able to accomplish, especially with how important they are to this offense that comes to us from Josh Furlong's X account. And when I hear that, if you were to say what position group, JT, do you have the most confidence in for Utah, I might lean offensive line. I think there's definitely a couple of them that you could look to too. For me personally, I feel best about Utah's safeties. I think Teo Johnson, even though he had some tackling stuff, or I guess if we could narrow it down even more, it's the offensive tackles that Utah has. I mean, it's more of the best tackle tandems in the country when you talk about Caleb Lomu and Spencer Fano, just two lights out blindside protectors, and just maybe one of the best players in college football. Max Chadwick of Pro Football Focus, who we've had on the show before, called Fano one of the best returning players in the country, which is a massive compliment to Fano and his abilities. But getting back to this offense, like I said, offensive tackles, safeties, Whittingham's very confident in the interior offensive line. I still have questions based on what we saw last year about the interior of Utah's offensive line. No questions about the tackles. And I like Michael Mokafisi a lot. So I have less questions about him, although even him, he's made some mistakes in pass pro. I feel like we just kind of know what we're going to get in Michael Mokafisi. He's a good player, but not a great guard. But Kump and Tonga, I feel like one of them has to make a leap for this team to be better. If they are as good as Utah was last year, you're not going to reach the lofty heights and goals that you set out to. And it's not easy to be a Big 12 championship team, obviously. So even though one position not being able to maintain it, letting up pressure, not being able to work together on your double teams, which are so important in the zone blocking scheme that Utah loves to employ. There's way too many times last year I felt like that Tonga or Kump weren't able to hold and maintain their block. Or in the tight ends, I've talked about that too. Part of the reason the run game faltered to me was you weren't getting good enough run blocking production out of your tight end game. It wasn't just as simple as, hey, teams were loading the box. That's part of it. But also, there were so many times Utah couldn't even get a couple yards. And it's like, well, actually, the numbers wise, Utah looks like they're fine or even have an advantage, but someone would get beat. And so I still have questions about the offensive line, but in Kyle Whittingham, we trust. And I do think this group is going to be really good for Utah. I do think another year at center for Kump, this is year 3 now. I do think he's going to play his best ball this year, but is it good enough to get Utah where they want to go? That's where we'll find out. But also really encouraging to hear Whit talk about the depth that this group has up front on the offensive line, because it's a position where you often see injuries. So good to have that depth up front. Speaking of depth, Utah has a very interesting quarterback who's starting to emerge with this team. We've talked about Devin Dampier, Isaac Wilson, even a little bit about Nate Johnson and the way that Utah wants to use him. But there's another guy, and it's a freshman who's breaking on the scene in spring ball. I'm going to tell you about him in one moment. But first, today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by TurboTax. This is a message from our sponsor, Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was waiting and wondering and worrying if we're going to get any money back. That's what tax season brings. Then waiting, wondering, and worrying some more. Now with taxes, when you hear taxes, you can think about matching with a TurboTax expert who can help you do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives you your taxes, their undivided attention as they work on your return while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find you every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything with 100% guarantee, with 100% accuracy, all so you can get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now this is taxes. Get an expert now at turbotax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live, full service, real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See the guarantee details at turbotax.com/guarantees. You guys can head over and check out TurboTax to help your taxes done quicker today. Today's show is brought to you by Post District. Discover Post District, home to 4 of Salt Lake's newest and most stylish apartment buildings. The Register, Post House North, Post House South, and the 801 Flats. Each residence offers its own unique take on luxury urban living with features like waterfall kitchen islands, floor-to-ceiling windows, vaulted ceilings, and spacious patios, plus walk-in closets. You can enjoy premium amenities, including the city's largest residential gym, a year-round pool, golf simulator, massive TV wall for sports watch parties, and more. All anchored by a one-of-a-kind community. Step outside and find yourself immersed in Salt Lake's hottest dining and nightlife scene with award-winning spots like Urban Hill, Mencho Ramen, Level Crossing, Melancholy Wine Bar, and Sunday's Best just steps away. Whether you're looking for a studio, 1, 2, 3 bedroom, or penthouse, you can find your perfect home today. Visit liveatpost.com or call 801-590-6247. Mention this ad for an exclusive incentive too. Once again, you can visit liveatpost.com or call 801-590-6247. Mention this ad for the exclusive incentive. You can discover Post District today, home to 4 of Salt Lake's newest and most stylish apartment buildings. Byrd Ficklin is a name we talked about on this show. He's a member of Utah's 2025 recruiting class, but I did not think he would be making an impact this soon. Kyle Whittingham, and as well as we've just gotten to see action of him too, has already said like the 3 quarterbacks getting reps are Devin Dampier, Isaac Wilson, and then Byrd Ficklin. And as we mentioned too, it sounds like Utah is using Nate Johnson in several ways. The Swiss Army knife type of role has been dubbed, but Byrd Ficklin is a guy who is breaking out early with this team. I mean, we're talking about a 6'1" freshman, 181 pounds, a little bit of a late add to this class too. I remember this was a guy who was a 3-star recruit out of Oklahoma. He was named the 2023 Oklahoma All-State Offensive Player of the Year. So a nice get for this Utah team, but one that I felt like would be more a stash guy. We'd heard a lot about a Brandon Zerbrug as a guy that we thought would be in the running for QB2. Isaac Wilson had the experience, and Nate Johnson, another guy too, that I was like, okay, those would be the quarterbacks. So the fact that you have a freshman in Ficklin who's already turning heads and making plays has me immensely impressed. I mean, it does sound like he's got a legit chance to beat out Isaac Wilson. Now, granted, we remember what happened last year when we were like, Isaac Wilson has a chance to beat out Brandon Rose. He did. It didn't go so well. So that's something to keep in mind too. But I mean, Josh Furlong tweeted out when he said Byrd Ficklin is one slippery dude. He's a problem for defenses. That elusive ability is what makes Devin Dampier special. If you can have your backup quarterback be Byrd Ficklin and he can do and provide the same thing, that's incredibly exciting. The most dangerous thing about Utah's offense is Devin Dampier's legs. As good as the offensive tackles are, because you can have great protection, but the quarterback still has to be the one to make the plays and make things happen. It's why it's still the most important position on the field. You need a guy who can make a play at any time on the field. I believe Devin Dampier can be that guy. Wayshawn Parker could be too. Zach Williams very well might be. Landon King has made a couple plays in spring ball as well too. That has me excited at it finally being his breakout year, as I have not sold my Devin Dampier stock yet, which is something I'm excited about too. But this is a little bit more from Josh Furlong, posted about some notes and observations from the media viewing session. He writes here on his X, Byrd Ficklin is slippery and has a way of getting extra yards even when it looks like he should be down. He's live in practice, so he's been able to showcase more. That's cool too, that they trust him to go live. They trust him to say, hey, you're going to be live, so you might get hit a little bit more as a freshman. And I think that's good because you need to get him acclimated and ready to go for if he does end up being Utah wants to put the guys out there, give them the best chance to win games. And if Byrd Ficklin is that, then by all means, get him on the field early. I'm always going to be nervous when a true freshman quarterback takes the field just because I think it's best for these guys to sit back, develop, and learn. But the fact they're already giving Byrd Ficklin reps, the fact that they're already excited about him leaves me excited. Utah's quarterback development has been lacking. It's why when Cam Rising has gone down the last couple of years, I won't say the season's been over because 8-4 a couple of years ago, and yeah, the Northwestern Bowl loss hurt, but like 8-4 with the injuries and the losses that Utah had that year, that was still a special season. But last year really exposed the lack of quarterback depth. So the fact that you've already got freshmen coming in, pushing some guys, and just doing enough to earn reps is awesome, especially when there's guys like, Wyatt Becker was the guy who was more heralded in this recruiting class at the time. So the fact that Ficklin's beat him out, the fact that he's beat out Zurbrugg, who had a year of practice at Oklahoma, is great news for this Utah team. So really excited to see what Ficklin can continue to do with this team too. Also, some other observations from practice, courtesy of Josh Furlong. He talked about how Isaac Wilson had a great dive today where he looked like the best I've seen him. That's a high praise there. Made great read, had a nice touch on the ball, and hit some tight windows that weren't obvious immediately. So high praise there. And Coach Whittingham as well said that, hey, Wilson's doing some nice things, but still needs to continue to get better. So that's something we know about with Isaac Wilson. The flashes were there last year. He had the big long pass, I want to say, was to Money Parks last year. And there were a couple of really nice plays, really nice moments, really nice throws, but nowhere near consistent enough together to pose a problem for opposing teams. So that's where Wilson has to continue to grow. I'm glad he's getting these reps early. He also talked about just wanting to come back to Utah because he has so much belief in what Coach Whittingham does, which is really encouraging. Obviously, that Wilson went through a lot. Utah went through a lot last year. So hearing him talk about his love for this program and Coach Witt is something that got me really encouraged. I think there's a lot of guys who went through what Wilson went through, they would be moving on and not as inclined. So I was excited to hear that that Wilson does have those two do have the deep bond. We talked about Zach Williams being the guy who's making some plays and then also just getting some, as Josh Furlong noted too, the guy who got yards after catch, which Kyle Whittingham talked about as well too. Otto Tia is the guy who had some nice catches today, says Josh Furlong, as did Creed Whitmore. That's where it's really interesting. It just seems like there's a lot of guys vying for time in this Utah wide receiver room. I would love it if Utah had 4 receivers we felt really good about. So if it could be Zach Williams, Otto Tia, Creed Whitmore, Ryan Davis, I would love that. And that's without even mentioning, I think we saw not too long ago, Darren Zipper was doing some stuff, both Hunter Andrews. Yeah, last year, this offense didn't use a ton of tight ends, but based on the reports we're hearing, Dallin Bentley, Devin Dampier, and Hunter Andrews are all going to play a role with this team. And that, to me, is incredibly exciting. And I love seeing that Otto Tia is making some plays. He is this team's biggest receiver. I want Devin Dampier to throw him the ball, give him chances on the outside to make plays, because I do believe he's the type of special talent and athlete that's going to make the plays, that he's going to step up and deliver when this team needs him most too. Josh Furlong did also tweet out that defense got some wins today against Devin Dampier, but on to the next series, he got them back and moved the ball well. I think Devin Dampier, especially early in the year, is going to be a little bit of a roller coaster ride. I think the highs are going to be incredibly high. And I think in order for this team to reach its potential, they're going to have to let Devin Dampier turn the ball over, figure it out. They have to take the training wheels off right away. You cannot just let Devin Dampier run the ball. You have to let him air it out, because Devin Dampier is the type of quarterback that is going to turn it over and put you in a bad spot. And you know what else he's going to do? He's going to put on that cape and be Superman and save you at the end of the day. And yeah, he was the one that got you in that bad position. But because you trust and believe in him, he can make those dynamic plays that can win you games that you otherwise wouldn't be able to win with a game manager. Devin Dampier is so much more than a game manager. So I like hearing that, hey, he has some struggles. This is a good defense too. He's going against guys like Smith Snowden. How many corners in the country are better than Smith Snowden? Talked about my love for this safety group. And it's a Utah defensive line where I think it was Kyle Whittingham said they go like 6 deep at defensive end, which makes a lot of sense with a lot of veteran transfers that this team is bringing on too. And we'll talk about the defensive tackle depth in the next segment too. But there's just a lot of guys that this Utah team has, including a guy like Dylan Curtis. That's another guy who we didn't get to talk about the spring, what we saw on Saturday, but all the media members were tweeting about Dylan Curtis's leg. I think they let him try a 60-plus yarder, and he came up just short, but it was windy. So you got Dylan Curtis, who's capable of making things happen. You have another guy too, Curtis being the kicker, but he made a couple of, I think he made another nice long kick too. So a true freshman who was rated a decently high recruit, and looks like right away he's going to be making an impact. This Utah offense is going to look drastically different next year. And based on the lack of production last year, that's a great thing. So love that the early returns are strong. Really excited to see what the receiver room continues to shake out to be. Guys like Zach Williams, love hearing that he's stepping up. Byrd Ficklin, maybe pushing Isaac Wilson for the backup quarterback spot. That's something I'm intrigued by and excited to continue to monitor. Just like one thing I've frequently talked about on the show is I'm really curious of what Utah's defensive tackle room is going to look like. They lost their top 3 guys on a per snap basis. I do believe Samote Pepa edged out or barely beat out Dallas Vakalaki. But either way, you lose to your top 3 guys, Kano Tanavasa, Peppa to Funa, or arguably 3 of your top 4. How does Utah replace that? Well, Kyle Whittingham was asked about that. We'll talk about his answer in one moment. Today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by our friends at Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO gives you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you can just stop managing your money and start building wealth. There's those surprising insights. When I started using Monarch Money, I realized just how much I was spending on food delivery. Now I budget smarter and save more. There's also that all-in-one convenience. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan your long-term goals. There's easy collaboration. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can just track and share your personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control over your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege. That's all caps, no spaces, at monarchmoney.com, 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege, all caps, no spaces, for half off your first year with that code LOCKEDONCollege. For half off your first year, you can check out Monarch Money today. The defensive tack room took a massive hit. Junior Tafuna, Keanu Tanavasa, and Samote Peppa are all gone. I like Ivan Mahi back. That's great. You got a veteran back, and I like Ivan Mahi. I think he is an elite run defender. Yes, he battled injuries last year, but Aleki Vaimaki did not register a sack in 4 games. And in fact, if you look over the course of his career, he has a total of, he's never had more than 2 sacks in a year. And the most he had with those 2 were back in all the way in 2021. So could he have more next year? Yes, but it's not likely based on that production. And a guy like Vaimaki, who's been around for a while, I just feel like we know who he is. He's an elite, or maybe not elite. He's a really good run-stopping defensive tackle. He'll gobble up double teams and free up his teammates. And I love that he's able to do that. But Utah still needs that guy who's going to create havoc on the interior. Now, could that be Dallas Vakalahi? Of course. He had 9 tackles last year, played in a lot of games for his Utah team, 2 sacks. I like the interior pressure that he brought. But still, that's a true freshman last year, stepping into a larger role. It's a lot on his plate. Can he do it? Sure. Will he? That remains to be seen. Jonah Laea is the other guy. Coach Whittingham mentioned they feel really good about the top 3 defensive tackles and they're looking for someone else to step up. Laea is a guy we haven't seen a lot of. He's a redshirt sophomore, 6'5", 271, defensive tackle too. Played in 6 games last year, 2 tackles with 1 apiece for Southern Utah and Baylor. And this guy's a 3-star recruit, number 10 recruit out of the state of Nevada in the class of 2022. So a guy's been buying his time a little bit too. The redshirt sophomores we mentioned this year now will have an opportunity to come in and be a contributor on this team. This is a guy who has a chance to be a legit guy for Utah, but just haven't seen him. As for who else is going to step up, because Coach Witt said they're looking to see more of these guys, I think it will end up being a Carson Kafusi. We've heard a lot of good raving reports and reviews about him. Had he not been hurt, I think there's even been people who've said he would have had a chance to become a 4-star player. So I think we'll see some Kafusi as the year draws closer, because he's got a long off season too, where he can continue to grow and get stronger and develop before the pads come on in fall ball. So I like this defensive tackle group, and I know they've said like, hey, we have a history and tradition. Yes, they do. So I'm not doubting that they won't be solid. But I've also heard Utah talk a lot about how they really want to be better on defense. When you lose that much run-stopping production, and a guy like Corene Reed, and obviously some other pieces too, including not just Corene Reed, Van Fillinger, and Connor O'Toole, some of your top defensive ends too. It's a lot. It's a lot to replace if you're Utah. Utah's done it before, but it's easier said than done. And this to me is different than in past years. Like, hey, when Utah's lost a corner, it's like, well, look at who they got coming back here. They got Smith Stone back. Like, they have like guys that you get really excited about. Aleki Vaimahi has never been a starter on this team. Dallas Vakalahi has never been a starter on this team. We've barely ever seen Jonah Laea. Utah's defensive tackles, I think, will be fine, but expecting them to be game changers or to say like these guys will be difference makers, I can't go there yet until I see them. Also, Coach Whittingham, we'll see how much we get to see him. Coach Whittingham said we're not going to see a ton of starters in the spring game. He was asked about, like, hey, still having a spring game. A lot of people are canceling them because they're worried about their roster getting poached. And Witt said he totally acknowledges and gets that, but they feel good about, they want to give these guys the opportunity. And that's why they're not going to play a lot of the veterans, which I do think is smart, not to risk injury, as well as just, if you do got some guys that you're like, hey, these are ballers and they ball in spring ball, and then someone comes in with an NIL package. That's the crazy thing about this era. You don't want that to be the case. And we saw that happen last year with, I don't think it was in the spring game, but Utah center. Coley ended up going to A&M, being their center. That was supposed to be the guy at center. I do think his presence would have helped Utah last year, but now we'll see what Jaron Kumpkin and this offensive line can do, and we'll see what this whole Utah team can do. So a lot of positive reports coming out of spring ball. I'm excited about the progress that Utah is making, but let me know below. How do you guys like the progress that Utah is making? Do you feel optimistic about the direction that this Utah football program is headed in for the 25 season? We got the spring game coming up not long at all either. Also, we want to thank you again for making Locked On Utes your first listen today. For your second listen, check out Locked On NFL Draft with Damian Parson and Keith Sanchez as your favorite collegiate players get ready for the next level. You get the latest draft rankings, rumors, and news every day. Find Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. That's going to do it for our show. Thank you again for making Locked On Utes your first listen of the day. We'll be back with you tomorrow talking about the latest in Utah athletics, including, unfortunately, Utah missing out on Brock Harris as BYU has added another talented recruit. We'll be discussing it on tomorrow's show. Hope you'll join us then.